Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3, on page 1332. So in the last paragraph on 1330, beginning at the bottom of 1330, that ends on 1332, we learned about the Yud, what the Yud represents, in general, Chochmah, and especially Pnimis HaChochmah, Atzmis HaChochmah, the inner dimension of Chochmah that serves as a bridge to Keser, Ta'atik, and that's also his connection that in its root, he says, it's rooted in the head of the Kav. The Kav is the source of Gilui. After the Tzimtzum, the Kav is the thread of light that brings all the Giluim and all of the cosmic order, the whole Seder Shtalshus. The head of the Kav is the letter Yud, which is the root, as he said, Yesh, he said on page 1331. In Cain, he says, Atzmis HaChochmah, so, what's the lesson here? Al-Pima, the Chochmah Stima is the level of Atik, the Chochmah Shebechinis Yud, Yesh, the B'Shosha, Zeh Bechinis Reishis, Gili HaKav. And then he supported that with Rabbeinu Bachaye, that the Reishis, Hashem Kanoni Reishis Darkei, that's the Reishis Akav. And that is a level of Oyer. Even though it's Oyer, he explained at length why it's called Oyer. So even though there's an element of Nistaris, of concealment, but generally it's a level of revelation. But nevertheless, it's in the form of Havdalah, removed. Now, when you read it again, it sounds like they're removed. First, it looks like it's removed from the lower levels of the spheres. But it also seems to be that Havdalah means it's also removed from anything that's called darkness. But regardless, Seichel, the Chochmah is a revelation, but of a highest form of revelation. It's removed from all lower levels of revelation in the sense that it is, like he said, that it is, Chochmah in general is removed, and especially Primis HaChochmah, I'm saying even Chetzenis HaChochmah is higher than comprehension itself, is the Nekudas HaSkola. It's just the spark of the idea. And also, as we learned earlier, Hanochas Sichli is the resonance of an idea, which is more than just understanding it. That can't really fully be, that can be comprehended. And for sure, Primis HaChochmah is removed. And being that it's removed, like he says, so it's removed from everything, even from the lower levels of Giluim, and definitely from Cheshach, from darkness. Like he explained, like someone who grew up or was born, Mishu, that's in the Sava Ba'er. His whole being was created in a level of light of revelation, which he says is Primis HaChochmah, that refers to the deepest revelations, the inner and core revelations before Atzilus that come into the world of Netzalim, because that's what Chochmah does. Chochmah brings the Ayin of Keser, the Bittul, into the world of Netzalim, of the emanations. So he says all that is really fundamentally a higher level of Gili, Primis Abba, Primis Atik, Shaloi, like he says, Shaloi, it was not diminished to be on the level of the emanations. Its role is to be that interface. So as such, it's completely beyond any darkness. It's completely beyond any form of darkness, and therefore it doesn't recognize darkness at all. And that alone is the reason it can transform darkness, like in the second level of sweetening the Gvuras, the judgments that comes from like the Eitz HaChaim, a level of light that's so powerful that it just zaps away the darkness and transforms it. But it's the power of light to replace the darkness. And that's what has the form, the power to transform. But all this is Oyer, the way it comes Begili after the Tzimtzum. So Chochmah, the Nekuda, is the way Oyer comes after the Tzimtzum, and it has the power to transform the Tzimtzum, to transform the darkness of Gvura and the Tzimtzum. Now, in the next paragraph, he's going to move now back to Avir. the Yud in Avir, in Yud in Avir, which is the Reshimu. I want to give a small introduction before we continue, because it's going to be very important to understand the flow here. Just 1 second. Okay. So now the next paragraph, he's going to talk about how this Yud exists, this Oyer exists within the Reshimu. Now remember, the Reshimu is not the Kav. The Kav is a function of Gilui. The Reshimu's purpose is not Gilui. Actually, the Reshimu's purpose is to bring us a divine package that is beyond Gilui. However, as we learned, the Reshimu has two components in it. One is the Etzem Nekudas HaReshimu, like the letters themselves, the power of Gvul, God's power to confine and limit, which is rooted in the Helam HaAtzmi. But the Reshimu also has within it also Oyer, as we learned. The Oyer to reveal to another, that's the Oyer we call Shir Atzmei B'Koyach, how God is already envisioning existence. The Oyer Legalis La'atzmei, how God is not envisioning existence, but how he's revealed there's already a conscious state, Ola B'Ritzene, or even Kedem Alei Saratzen, but he's aware of it. He's aware of it. There's a revealed state. And then there's a state that's even before Kedem Alei Saratzen, like we learned, that's not even altogether revealed, but it's still Etzem HaOyer. It's the root of Oyer. It's not Helam Atzmi. And all that's included in the Reshimu. Now, I explained at length why he said, I explained, I'll say it again. Why is it important that the Reshimu has both elements? Why can't you just say that the Kav is Gilui and the Reshimu is concealment, the root of the containers? And you need both, and they'll interact with each other. But here he says clearly the Reshimu is a trace of everything that was there before the Tzimtzum. And as we'll learn, the Tzimtzum didn't even impact it, as opposed to the Kav, where the Tzimtzum did impact. So why can't you just say there's these two things? Why is it so important that the Reshimu exists and have all of this? So the Alter Rebbe, as I mentioned in Torah he already makes the statement that the Reshimu has something the Kav doesn't have. And that's where the Rebbe Marash's Hagah and footnote is. And I elaborated on the whole Reshimu in this context, both in our classes here and also the shiurim I gave in the classes I gave in the Kollel and the 8-part series I did on My Life Chassidus Applied that year that was posted on the group. So I discussed that at length, but I just want to touch upon a few key points here because it's going to help understand where we're going here. Because we say that the Reshimu also has in it the concealed all the air that's going to come out. Remember, we learned on the bottom of page 1330 from the Zeir HaRakia, he said that the ingalifu clay kibul the kabel betechel kol esh yashpi ein se baruch umaz v'halo, that the Reshimu includes in it everything that will ever emerge through Avodas Hashem, like he said, everything that we will ever do in drawing divine energy, including Etzem HaOyer, which is Torah, like he explained there, is all concentrated in the Reshimu. The Reshimu has it all in a capsule. So why is that so vital? Because here's the answer. Because you don't want to have at the end two kavim of Helam and Gilui that are mutually exclusive. You want them to be interconnected. Remember, the God, the Atzmus, is not Reshimu, is not Helam and not Gilui. He's not Oyer and he's not Helam HaAtzmi. The Eibishter is higher than both. Yecholte l'hoyer, yecholte shelo l'hoyer. He can emanate and radiate and express, and he could also withhold and not express. Later, that would be called chesed and gvura, hein gvuresa, the power of reveal, the power of concealment, or chesed and gvura. So the two tracks are in Ishtalshalos, or even before Ishtalshalos, even before the Tzimtzum, you have the two tracks, but in their root, there's only Hashem Echad, there's only one God. So you have to say that each of these tracks has the other one included within it. First of all, because they're all coming from one source. Second of all, for us to experience the divine in the fullest sense, we don't want to just experience God's concealment or God's revelation. We want the very concealment to become revealed, and the very revelation to reveal also that which is fundamentally concealed. We want a dire betachtenim, in tachtenim, which is fundamentally a place of concealment. Tachtenim means helam erei yizbarach, is the concealment of godliness. Chesher kafle mechupel in the deepest way. And then we want dire latzmuse. That should be a dire, which means that atzmus should be begoli. And a dire, we're not concealed. The person who lives in a home is actually fully expressed. In the street, when you're not at home, you limit yourself. You don't fully let everything hang out, so to speak. At home, you're completely comfortable. So we want the God to be completely comfortable in a place of total concealment. So in order to have that full unity, you have to have that the concealment have within it the oir, even though it's concealed, and the oir should also have in it the power of Helam. We learned about this, especially in volume 2, where we spoke that the tzimtzum is b'shvil hagili, like when a teacher conceals his intelligence from a student, it's in order to reveal. It's not a concealment for the name of concealment. It's not an end in itself. And the revelation before the tzimtzum, its purpose is that it should come down and be revealed to recipients after the tzimtzum. So in a way, the tzimtzum is also included. The kavonas ha-tzimtzum is included in the gilui, and the kavonas ha-gilui is included in the tzimtzum. What does that mean in different terms? That in the Reshimu is included also the gilui. However, it's now in a time capsule, so to speak. It's concentrated. The truth is the other way around as well, that in the Kav is included also the Helam. Or in the Oir Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum is even included the Helam, except it doesn't come out B'Poil until after the Tzimtzum. So the Reshimu is actually, as we spoke about, is an entity from pre-Tzimtzum. A pre-Tzimtzum is an impression that comes from a pre-Tzimtzum reality and consciousness that is now carrying everything from pre-Tzimtzum, both the Helam Ha'atzmi. That's the first thing in the Reshimu. The very Asis of Reshimu is Helam Ha'atzmi. Like he said, Etzem Nekudas Reshimu, the Nekud itself. And the second thing is that the Reshimu also has all the Oyer in it, but in a concealed way. Then comes the Kav. The Kav, remember, also has the instructions to, its whole purpose is to reveal, but it's a Kav Mitzumtzum. It's a Kav that was affected by the Tzimtzum. And the Oyer before the Tzimtzum knew that it would have to go through a Tzimtzum. And that would impact it. And its impact would be such that would create a Kav that would now reveal. The Kav, working together with the Reshimu, activates all the potential of the Reshimu, draws out of it all the Oyer from before the Tzimtzum, as well as the Helam Ha'atzmi, ultimately from the Kalim of when you transform Zdenis to Zachias, the most negative, the darkness to light. So what do you have here? You have here on every possible level, you have light and darkness working together, both in the first level of sweetening, where there's more light than darkness, like more sweet water than there is bitter water. Then the second, but that's not transforming. That's like the Veda of the Tzaddik Sheina Gomer, where the animal soul has been conquered, but not been transformed completely. Then there's the level of transformation that comes from a level of Oyer, like we just learned with Chachma. Oyer that's completely beyond Cheshach, so it has the power to transform. But then you need to have a transformation from within, and that's going to come from the Nekudas HaReshimu, the Reshimu itself. But in between, we're now going to talk about the Yud within the Yud of the Oyer that is concealed in the Reshimu as well. So the Reshimu doesn't just have pure concealment, it also has Oyer that's concealed. So it has the power of concealment, like the power to create letters. That's the power of Gvul. But the letters have in them also the potential of the ideas that these letters convey. They're not superimposed. They're not outside ideas. The letters themselves contain the potential, just like letters, before you write a page, they're there. They have the potential. Beis, Reish, Vav, Chav has the potential becoming a word that conveys the Oyer, the energy of blessing. However, when you just see a Beis and a Reish, a Vav, Chav, you don't see it yet. So the Reshimu has also the power of the Gili. So you have everything going on. Now, one more point I want to make, which is vital before we continue. The key thing, and here's the ultimate paradox, but if you think about it, it's extremely eloquent. You would think that Giluyim are mutually exclusive in the world of Giluyim, that Giluyim defy the Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means concealment. Giluyim means revelation. So you would think, okay, you need to conceal, because if you don't conceal the infinite light, we won't be able to receive it. There won't be another consciousness to be able to receive it. So the Tzimtzum conceals, like the teacher conceals his brilliance in order for the student to receive. But receiving, the reception, comes from a transmission called the Kav. Now the Kav, in order for it to be able to be integrated and internalized by the student, has to have been affected by the Tzimtzum. Because if not, what did you accomplish? If the Kav is going to bring the light that was there before the Tzimtzum, then what did the Tzimtzum accomplish? The whole point of the Tzimtzum is to take the light and channel it. So to conceal and then to channel it, then now the Kav can go and in a tailored and customized way create Chachma, Bina, Yehi Oyer, Yehi Rakia, to create existence. So the Oyer is subject to the Tzimtzum. What about the Helam? You would think Helam is for sure subject to the Tzimtzum, because the whole idea of Helam is concealment. But the interesting thing is that the Reshimu, as the Alter Rebbe says in Torah Noach, and the Rebbe Marash says, Lo yinoga behem hatzimtzum, that the letters, the Tzimtzum never affected it. You know why? Because it was not subject to Tzimtzum, because it's God's power to conceal. God's power to conceal doesn't have to be concealed. It is concealment. So in a way, the Reshimu, ironically or paradoxically, has something from pre-Tzimtzum that's not affected by Tzimtzum. The very power to conceal, and more importantly, the in the Reshimu was not affected by the Tzimtzum. What was affected, that we don't see the but it's in the Reshimu intact. So the Reshimu is just waiting for the day when the Kav slowly creates and slowly trains, and the Kalim expand, that they can receive more They receive more and more till they can start receiving the that's even the unfiltered that is concealed and concentrated in the Tzimtzum, in the Reshimu. So that's an interesting, that's a chiddush that the Alter Rebbe and the Rebbe Marash really explains, and the Rebbe Marashab is building this whole piece just on that, which is not the way the Kopester, the Malganovis, who disagreed with the Rebbe Marash, and he criticized that, he said, Lo noga b'matzimtzum. So this is clearly a deeper dimension of understanding the Reshimu, that the Reshimu is actually a transplant from pre-Tzimtzum consciousness. Now, how could that be transplanted when we say we need a Tzimtzum? Because it's transplanted in a concealed way. Remember, koyach nelam. That's why the transformation of the Gvura in the third level is coming from within. Because even though it's based on the root of Helam Ha'atzmi, but the Helam Ha'atzmi is a koyach nivdal, a koyach nelam, I should say. It's completely concealed. What happens on Yom Kippur or the Shefer Gadol, we learned, even though that's the place that wakes up even the lost souls, but it comes in a completely concealed way. That's why the student is not affected by it. So in a sense, the teacher who has now concealed his intelligence, and afterwards comes a Kav where he's teaching the student step by step. There's another component here, that within the concealment lies a concentrated everything, that all the levels of the brilliance of the teacher, even the etzem ha'or that's beyond the teacher's grasp, even the etzem ha'or, but it's in a form that doesn't affect the student because it's concealed. When the student will begin through Oyer of Kav, reveal and integrate Elikus, godliness, godly, divine, revealed energy, then slowly he'll come to a point where the Reshimu will so-called reveal its treasures. And ultimately, everything that we will accomplish, including all the levels of Oyer, all the way to before the Tzimtzum. So the Kav really is revealing to us Oyer after the Tzimtzum, with some diminished flow coming from before the Tzimtzum, obviously. Like we said, Chachma, the Yud of Chachma, is a very high level of Gili, but it's Gili. And it's a Gili that's coming in a form of a Yud, like a Tzimtzum, but it carries within it all the, like we said, Etzem Oyer. That's why it's only a Yud, because it's so close to Oyer and Sof. But it's all Oyer. Then comes the level of what we start revealing in the Reshimu, which will be both the Oyer within the Reshimu, and the very etzem of the Reshimu, which comes from the power of the Helam Atzmi that translates into the Koyach HaGvul. Now, this is what we're going to learn. The next paragraph is the middle step, which is what is the Gilui that's concealed within the Reshimu. And then he's going to go to the Reshimu itself, which is the third level of transformation. So let's learn this inside, and we're going to need to figure out also the Yud within the Avir of the Reshimu. What role does it play in the sweetening of the Gvura? Is it the second level of sweetening or the third level? And that's going to be something we'll need to discuss, but we'll see where it goes. So I just wanted to put this into context before we read on, so it shouldn't be overly complex or confusing. Okay. So let's read now the next paragraph on page 1332. Paragraph begins Omnam. So now that we have explained the Yud of Chochmah, which is rooted in the Yud of the head of the Kav, and he said, Kol zeh b'chinas ha'oyer, k'mo sheba huba b'gilui la'achar tzimtzum. So clearly it's about the Oyer that it comes after the Tzimtzum. It's not the transformation of the Tzimtzum itself or the Gvura itself. He says, Omnam, however, by contrast, Inyan Yud HaKol ba'Avir, the Yud that is encompassed in Avir is not Oyer. Remember, Avir and Oyer. He explained on top of, in middle of page 1329, that Oyer is Gilui and Avir is Helam, Choshech beHelam, Choshech be'etzem. It's a fundamental state of darkness, this air, this environment, which is the Reshimu. So now we're not talking about the Yud of Chachma, which is true. It's only a concentrated Yud, but it's still Gilui. Like he said clearly, as much as it's concealed, it's still a level of fundamental Gilui, and actually highest level of Gilui, that go all the way to Atik in an undiluted way. Like he says, it wasn't diminished to go into the Netzalim, it's real Oyer. So he says now, this Yud, Hakol Ba'ava Hainu B'chinas Ha'er, Sheba B'gili Achar HaTzimtzum, K'may Shekol B'Nekudus HaReshimu Kanal. So now we're talking about the Oyer that will Sheba B'gili Achar HaTzimtzum, that comes in a revealed way after the Tzimtzum. So we're talking now the Oyer, the way it's encompassed in the Reshimu. Now the parentheses, frankly, needs explanation. What exactly does he mean to add by that? If he just said, canal, so if we learned earlier, we learned that Oyer, all the levels of Oyer before the Tzimtzum are encapsulated and in concentrated form in the Reshimu in a concealed way. He said the Gili Oyer la'atzme, the Lazulas to another, la'atzme and etzem Oyer. He said all that is included in the Tzimtzum, in the Reshimu. But remember, he also brought the Ramaz that I mentioned before, the Zeir Arakia rather, that says that the Reshimu has in it Klei Kibul, all Kol Er Shiashpi Ein Sof Ma'oz V'Hala, that all the air that will be transmitted also going forward, not just that was there before the Tzimtzum, is also included in the Reshimu, like he explained on page 1330. So what I believe he's saying here is that the Oyer, that we're not talking about the Oyer, that's the Reshis HaKav, which is the head of the Kav. We're talking about the Oyer that will become revealed after the Tzimtzum, is also included in the Reshimu. So the Avir, so Omnam in Yuda Kol Ba'avir Han B'chinas Ha'er, which will become revealed after the Tzimtzum, how it stands inside the commercial Kol B'Nekudus HaReshimu canal. It's how it's encompassed in the Nekudus HaReshimu. So Oyer, not Avir. Oyer is the Kav or the Gilui and Chochmah. That's the Nekuda that's revealed, that high level of Oyer that we talked about. Avir, on the other hand, is the Oyer as it's encompassed in the Reshimu, including the Oyer that comes after the Tzimtzum. Or as not including, it says Sheba B'gili Achar HaTzimtzum. So I think we'll understand this as we learn further, but that's what he said right now. So we're talking about the Oyer as it's inside the Reshimu now. V'nizbay le'il, the Oyer k'may shekol b'Reshimu, hu shalei noga ba'atzimtzum. And we learned earlier that the Oyer, the way it's encompassed in the Reshimu, the b'lei noga ba'atzimtzum, the Tzimtzum didn't have an impact on it. V'hari zeh memuhusa Oyer k'may shoya koydem atzimtzum. So it's from the personality of the way it's after the tzimtzum. I'm sorry, the way it is pre-tzimtzum. So essentially what I just explained. So I think I should explain a little more. Remember we learned, as I mentioned before, that he says the words, everything that Neshamas Yisrael will draw down through their Avodah, everything is encompassed in the Reshimu. So which means the following. I asked the question then, if you remember, why can't you just say it's all included in the Kav? Since the Kav is a ray of light, and what kind of light? It's coming from before the Tzimtzum, it's the divine light. So say everything travels through the Kav. Now that's a fact, that's true. But he wants to have something more. He does the Kav at the end of the day is that's mitzumtzum. There's no way that the artist can create a painting on a canvas without limiting the flow. It can't be the Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum cannot be captured in a revealed way. And the Kav is meant to reveal. So the Kav has to be a limited flow. When the teacher is speaking, he has to limit the flow of what he's saying. What he doesn't have to limit, however, is what he's concealing. So the Reshimu represents what is being concealed, and in there lies all the light and all the revelation that will ultimately be discovered as the student begins to expand his containers and grow. So in addition to what the Kav will provide, and the Kav will reveal much, as I said, the Kav will ultimately reveal high levels, but one thing the Kav has been in fact impacted by was the Tzimtzum. And the Reshimu carries in it all the energy from pre-Tzimtzum. So then when we do the Avir down below, we're not just drawing from the Kav, we're ultimately also drawing from the Avir, the Ayir that's kolol in the Reshimu, which lay noga tzimtzum, and it's exact same personality, the way it was kaidem at tzimtzum. I want to stop here in case someone's not clear, because this is quite dense, and I just want to make sure we go slowly here to make sure everybody gets it. So if anybody wants to ask something, please do, because he's going to continue now and qualify and explain what this means. But I want to first make sure that everything I said till now is understood, at least to some extent.
It's not clear to me how the Kav was affected by the Tzimtzum. I think you said that it was affected by the Tzimtzum, but you also said that it brings light, pre-Tzimtzum reality into a post-Tzimtzum reality. That's the idea. It's a connecting channel, if you will. So I'm a little confused about whether Hakav Naga but Tzimtzum. And what is the Kav anyways? I mean, it seems like it wasn't created by the Tzimtzum, so it seems to have pre-existed it. So how could it have been affected by it?
Well, let me explain what the Kav is, and then you'll see. The Kav is only affected by the Tzimtzum. It doesn't have any real, basically, when a teacher is a brilliant teacher and his mind is flowing in an infinite manner, the student, there's no room for a student. The Kav, so the teacher has to conceal his brilliance. That's the Tzimtzum. That you understand why he has to conceal the brilliance?
Yes, right? Of course. Yes,
okay.
And I misspoke about it pre-existing the Tzimtzum, but it's unclear how it comes about. But please go ahead.
Okay, hold a second. Okay. So it has to be concealed. Now comes step 2. If the teacher just conceals his intelligence, you still don't have a communication going on. So now the teacher begins a flow of consciousness, of Gilui, called the Kav, where he starts teaching. The first mission, or Aleph Beis Gimel Daled Hey. That's the Kav. So the Kav could not have been existent without a Tzimtzum. Because if the Gili there's no Tzimtzum, then the Gili would not be Aleph Beis Gimel Daled. It would not be a narrow Kav Chut, means a line and a thread. It wouldn't be a thread of energy. It would be infinite energy. So the infinite energy was concealed. Now the Kav is carrying definitely light. It's coming from the intelligence of this teacher. It's not coming from another place. So the Kav is a Gili from before the Tzimtzum, but it's a Gili that's now been distilled into a very particular line that's called a limited flow, and that limited flow is conveying ideas. Is it originating from? Yeah, but it's definitely affected by the tzimtzum. That's why it's a kav. That's why it's only Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dal. It's not infinite intelligence. Now, does the kav in a concealed way have more intelligence than Aleph, Beis? Of course. When the teacher says Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, within it lies much more brilliance than the student understands at that point. But still, the very kav itself was created by and could not have existed unless there was a tzimtzum. And that's always going to be the case. The Eibishter wanted us to have something from pre-tzimtzum that was not affected by the tzimtzum. So he created another thing that in the very concealment, he embedded in it a Reshimu that has in it the Ayir as it was untouched by tzimtzum. The kav is Ayir touched by tzimtzum or impacted by tzimtzum. But this is completely concealed. So when the kav will do its work, ultimately it will access also the deeper concealed levels. So when they work together, you'll ultimately have a revelation of pre-tzimtzum Ayir that was not affected by the tzimtzum through the kav that was affected by the tzimtzum. That's the ultimate combination. Now, I want to add one more key point here. Because they both come from Atzmus, which means even the kav ultimately is also divine energy. So it has within it also embedded within it also the Eir HaBligvul from before the tzimtzum. But with the Reshimu, it becomes far more, I would even say eloquent, if more than eloquent, far more rounded and understanding how everything works together. And when they work together, you ultimately have the total union of both dimensions. Now, I wanted to add one more thing. What did I want to add? The Eitz Chaim asks a question. Why did God have to create a full tzimtzum since he's going to send a kav anyway? So he could have just taken away all the Ayir and just left a stream of a line and a thread. Why do you have to, everything has to be concealed 100%? And then comes Chazir v'Hoyer, he then sends the kav in. Eitz Chaim asked that question. And the answer, the Eitz Chaim says, because if he did that, the intensity of the Ayir would still be so powerful that the kav would still be impacted and it wouldn't allow for kalim, for recipients to emerge. So you had to basically, it's like saying, why does the teacher have to be completely silent? Why does silence have to precede the gilui, the revelation? Let him slow down his mind, and instead of speaking everything he knows, he'll just speak about the things he wants to convey. But it would still be under the impact of his intensity. So the silence creates a certain type of leap, like a paradigm shift, that conceals that whole consciousness where the divine is paramount and dominant, the infinite divine is dominant, and now allows for space. Once there's space, now the kalim can emerge, then the kav comes after that. So that tells you even more how much the kav is a result and product of the tzimtzum. It's not just light that remained, nothing remained. It was a total pause, so to speak, conceptually, obviously, not in time. And then followed by that came the kav. That's what I wanted to add. But on the other hand, the very fact that the Eitz Chaim asked the question, the Rebbe Rashab at the beginning of Ayin Beis says, what kind of question is that? How could the kav remain? The kav is the Eir HaGvul. So he says, because the kav does have in it, how could the kav remain? And the only answer is the kalim. So he says there, that tells you that the kav has a root before the tzimtzum. Because if not, there would be no question. How could you say the kav would remain? If the kav is a complete creation after the tzimtzum. So to say the kav is completely disconnected, no, it's not. But it's definitely deeply impacted. And there he talks about the different impact. There's two types of impact on the kav. It conceals the bligvul, it diminishes the gvul. But bottom line is that there is an impact. So did I answer your question? I hope I did.
Yes, very, very much. Is it fair to say that, of course, these are labels we're putting on things. A couple follow-up questions. So they're both related. So one is it fair to say that the kav that is Well, these two questions go at the same time. First of all, this process is unfolding every moment. It's not like the Big Bang, so to speak, where it just happened and it was 3.3 billion years, whatever years ago. But this is an unfolding process that happens at every moment. That's sub question one. Sub question two
Answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Okay, and then sub question two is the Kav is essentially the mechanism by which God reveals God, light, divine light, godliness as the Tzimtzum process occurs, meaning there has to be a mechanism for revelation. So it's called the Kav, but it's contemporaneous with the Tzimtzum. It's all part of one machine, if you will. Like you can't have a Tzimtzum, you can't have a Chalal, an empty chamber without the Kav. It kind of all happens at the same time. It's a process. It's not like separate parts. They all kind of go together. And the Reshimu is there too. It's sort of like one system. You can't dissect it and say, well, there's a Reshimu and then there's a Kav and they're independent. It's all part of one Tzimtzum and revelation process. Is that fairly said?
Or better, I would say it somewhat differently. All this is above time, so it's hard for us to comprehend because we live in a world of time and space. So for us, before, after, past, present, and future is understood in real ways, like yesterday, today, tomorrow. It's hard to imagine how all this is. It's hard for us to fully wrap our head around conceptual time and spiritual time, so to speak. So that's how I would phrase it. So it's true to say that it's all happening together, but it's also separate levels, and you simply have to try to imagine, or at least abstract, what conceptual time means. That's not physical time.
Thank you. Those are great words. Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, for example, so I'll just give you an example. When we say Av and Ben, so Av and Tulda, a father and a child. So a father is always older than a child, right? That's a rule. A father was born before a child. That's why he's his child. So a father could be 20 years older than his child, 30 years older, whatever. When you say Av and Tulda, for example, in Hilchos Shabbos, so Avis Malachis and Tuldas Malachis, so you say the Avis are the root work, and those roots have subcategories. Like when you make an outline, you can actually make the outline that the subcategories are made the same time that when you make the categories. But conceptually, the categories precede the subcategories. See what I'm saying? So in other words,
brilliant. Yes.
So it's essentially more like a conceptual hierarchy as opposed to a time-based hierarchy.
Got it. Thank you. All very helpful clarification.
Yeah. That alone is a whole exercise of how to train ourselves to think that way. Because in truth is we would understand each other a lot better, and we would be far more soulful people if we lived on that level of, we'll call it spiritual time and space as opposed to physical time and space. The idea is that, for example, a person gets very depressed by something that's happening right now. The person who's able to rise above and realize that life is a narrative and not everything is fragmented and disjointed moments is the one that understands the bigger picture. So it's really a way of understanding the bigger picture, which still consists of details. Kav, Reshimu, Tzimtzum, Lifnat Tzimtzum, and all that. So it's basically states of being is what I would call them. They're states of consciousness, different states of being that interact. And the only way we can speak is this comes first, Kedemat Tzimtzum, La'acharat Tzimtzum, before Tzimtzum. But you really mean, like when I said in my class last night, and I talked about trauma, that we originate from a pre-Tzimtzum reality, which means pre-traumas and pre-dissonance. That means our fundamental nature comes from a different reality. So when we say pre, you don't really mean in time. It don't mean time. You mean it's pre the consciousness we're aware of. See what I'm saying?
Hierarchical is a good word. It's not chronological. Yeah. It's hierarchical.
Okay.
Got it.
Anybody else? Any other questions? So now he says like this. He's going to qualify this. He's saying, 1 second. You're telling me that the Avir and the Ayir are two different states. The Ayir is the Ayir that comes begili after the Tzimtzum. The Avir is the Ayir that comes begili after the tzimtzum, as it's included in the Reshimu. But we said the Reshimu has in it all the potential of the oil that's going to come begili. The ima Yesh shu b'chinas moker legili oil dahainu oil akav. And even though the Reshimu is the moker, the source for the oil akav, because the Reshimu includes in it all the oil that would come out begili. So why is there a distinction? The Reshimu is basically the place where the kav is drawing its oil from. Now remember, it's true the oil akav is coming from before the tzimtzum. And actually, if you recall, I think Eliezer asked the question, and the Rebbe and was mechaven to the question the Rebbe asked in Ranat, where he says, how could you say the kav comes from the Reshimu? Doesn't it come from the Igul HaGadol? So he says there because it means that the kav is nimshach al yedei tzimtzum v'aresha. So even though it originates, remember it originates before the tzimtzum, but it's nimshach al yedei. It's coming through the Reshimu, and in this case, the Reshimu is the oyer that will ultimately be revealed in the kav. So why are you making a distinction? Or better put, what is the distinction between oyer and avir? Between, in other words, the oyer of the kav as it comes begilui after the tzimtzum, and the oyer of that oyer, how it's encompassed in the Reshimu, what we call avir. So it says, "V'ima Yesh b'chinas mokel legilui dahainu oyer kav, sharizeu masher kol batzmusei b'chinas oyer hameir el azulos hainu elam is veishtalshlus." Let me explain this. Unless you understand it, I'll explain it anyway. If you may remember, we talked before, there are three levels of oyer. There's the oyer of the etzem oyer, where it's beyond consciousness altogether. It's like the desire to have a home, but you don't even know about it. The etzem hanefesh wants to have a home. So there's the level of etzem oyer that he calls, which is even before, precedes gam koydem al esarot. It's even before the desire arose. Even before the state that is before the desire arose. Then there's the gilui la'atzmei, that you're aware of it, but no one else is. And then God, the artist, envisions the art he wants to create. This is already oyer that relates to the other. The teacher in his mind is envisioning what we call shir atzmei b'koyach. He allocates and envisions and allocates in his mind what he wants to be mashpia. So that's an oyer before the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum comes, it conceals all that, but the Reshimu carries that. So when the kav comes, the kav is actually drawing out of the Reshimu that oyer, that's legalis lezulose. Because what's happening? So the oyer of the 10 hidden spheres, the oyer of the artist envisioning existence, is now encapsulated and captured in the Reshimu in an undiluted way because there's no tzimtzum in it. And the kav is drawing from that. So then why are you distinguishing? What's the distinction between the way it's in the Reshimu and the way it's in the kav? Makol mokim. So even though that's true, that the kav is drawing it from the Reshimu, and the Reshimu is the source of that energy, obviously the Reshimu is carrying it from before the tzimtzum. Makol mokim arihu b'madrega nailus ma'ed. Nevertheless, the way it's in the seed of the Reshimu, it's in a very high level, an exalted level compared to the way it comes out revealed. Let's go back to the analogy I gave about the fetus. Upon conception, in this, the cell has in it concentrated everything that the child will become, right? Then the cell splits and it becomes and starts being revealed and branching out. 9 months later, you have a full-blown child. Let's compare. What is the difference between, let's say, the arm of the child, or the brain of the child, or the heart, or any part? How it is when the child is a complete developed child, or at least somewhat developed, or how it is that first moment of conception when it's all concentrated in one seed. Or what's the difference between an apple tree, a full-blown apple tree, its branches, its leaves, its trunk, its fruit, and how it is in the apple seed? Is it just a matter of quantity? That in the seed it's smaller and then it's a tree? No. He says it's a qualitative difference. In the Reshimu, which is compared to the seed, compared to that one cell, I'm just using that as an example. It's on a higher level. So even though it's true that the oyer of the kav that will come out originates from there, which in turn, the seed captures what was there before the tzimtzum, but still there's a fundamental distinction on the level of the oir, the way it is encompassed in the Reshimu, which is called Avir, and the way the oir is in the kav, even Reshis kav, the yud, that is already gilui. That's what he says here. And he gives an example. Think of the light of the sun, the way it's encompassed within the sun. If you were to compare sunlight that emerged from the sun, even sunlight that's close to the sun, let alone the way it comes down to earth. Well, let's say even Reshis HaKav. The Kav is already, the sunlight is outside of the sun. And what about how that sunlight is within the sun? He brings this in Shari Amun in chapter 3, that is far more intense. It's not just a matter of quantity, it's a matter of quality. The light within the sun is far more intense and a far different level than the light outside. And he brings now, not from Tanya because he wants to make a point, but Lukut Teira, Dibra Maskul Tiku Abeis, like he writes in Lukut Teira, in Tiku, the Maimer Tiku, Rosh Hashanah Maimer, the second one, Shehu B'chinas Ayin Legaba Erakav, that the sunlight within the sun, or in this case, like the energy, the oil within the Reshimu, is like ayin, like nothingness, complete nullification, complete bittul, compared to the Erakav Shanikri Yesh Legaba Erzeh. So the Kav is called a Yesh compared to the oil, the way it's encompassed inside the Reshimu, or like an example here inside the sun. That's how different they are, ayin and Yesh, because it's in a far higher divine level in that concealed state within the spark, or you could say the nukuda, the point or the seed of the Reshimu. So what's the Rebbe Rashab coming to say with all of this? So what do we know from this? So he says like this. So based on this, if even the oil of the Kav and Chochmah has the power to transform darkness like the tree of life in the second form of sweetening the Gvura, because it's so much light and doesn't have any relationship with darkness, how much more so this level of oil in the Reshimu? So this oil that the tzimtzum didn't affect, even though we can't see it, but the tzimtzum didn't affect, it's concentrated in there. It's all there. So this for sure has the power from this light, that the power that the shenasa. So from this light for sure has the power to transform the darkness into light. That's what he's saying now. Wow. Okay.
So getting back to Eliezer's question, is the light coming from the what have you said, the great circle, the surrounding circle? That's from the Ratzon, if you will, where he started Ayin Beis, or is the light coming from the Nekudas or Reshimu, where the light is in that point, that hidden concealed point of the Reshimu, or is it both? I mean, it's kind of unclear what's the like. Is it the center of the sun? I mean, you know, where's the light coming from? Is it? You understand the question?
The question is the question that Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe asks in the footnote here. That is there. He says it clearly. The answer is very straightforward. It originates from the Igul HaGadol, from the light before the Tzimtzum, but it travels through and is affected by the Tzimtzum and the Reshimu.
But you said it's tapping in. Yeah, but you said it's tapping into.
Like I said with the teacher has the intelligence. The Kav is coming from his intelligence, but it's now been completely affected by the Tzimtzum and the Reshimu that it travels through. It's traveling through it.
Mm-hmm. But the Reshimu has this ore that's concealed that is actually pre-Tzimtzum ore, and it's revealing that in some sense. So it's like, you see the question? There's light in this hidden point of the Reshimu, and there's light.
And where is that light coming from? Pre-Tzimtzum. The light that God envisioned existence.
It's the same
so that's
source.
The place where the Kav, if you talk the root of the Kav, ultimately is in God envisioning the structure of the 10 spheres. But in
Fascinating.
actuality, the way it's implemented, let's call the functionality, is that it now travels through the tzimtzum that conceals, the Reshimu that concentrates it, and then the kav. So all these factors are playing a role. If you take away the before the tzimtzum, the Reshima and tzimtzum don't do anything. They have no power. It's all coming. So it's like a process. The teacher has intelligence. He has to put that intelligence has to be processed through a tzimtzum and Reshimu to be able to reach the student. So the kav is a product of his before the tzimtzum, traveling the process through the tzimtzum and the Reshimu, and then emerges the kav.
Got it. Thank you.
The Reshimu adds the point that we have an element that is not tzimtzum affected, even though the kav itself is affected by the tzimtzum because it's gilui, and a gilui has to be diminished in order to be able to be received by its recipients. The Reshimu doesn't have to be received by the recipients. It remains the root of the recipient. It's the root of the containers. It's letters. It doesn't have gilui in it, so it doesn't have to be diminished in that sense. Okay. Yeah. I'll just read one more line. He says, "V'inyan hamshacha zu, lefi mashn is bar le'il," and this hamshacha of this oir, according to what we learned earlier, shezeh b'chinas alei saratzen, that this is alei saratzen. This is what arose in his desire. Like we learned before, alei saratzen is the root of the kav. So if you look on page 1330, in the parentheses, he said alei saratzen is the root of mamala, and that's the 10 hidden spheres. Okay, so he says based on that, so we're getting here is amshacha from the 10 hidden spheres, which is what God envisioned before the tzimtzum. It's concentrated in the Reshimu without being affected by the tzimtzum, and then it's revealed in the kav, which is like the light outside the sun as it becomes expressed, and that is affected by the tzimtzum. So he's just identifying that that's the level of the 10 hidden spheres, which is what the kav is going to ultimately create, the 10 revealed spheres from those 10 hidden ones that were envisioned by God. So you have before the tzimtzum, you have how it's concentrated in the Reshimu after the tzimtzum, and you have how the kav reveals it. So now we have established that Oyer and Avir, Oyer is the kav, and there's a yud there which is revealed, but it's completely beyond darkness, and therefore it has the power to transform, like he said in the previous paragraph, but even more so, how it's in the Reshimu, which is not affected by tzimtzum, even more so, which leads me to a question, but maybe it's also an answer. If you said that the Oyer is not completely not shaykh to cheshech, but you're saying the kav is affected by the tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is cheshech. So how could you say that that's completely beyond cheshech, and that's why it has the power to transform like the Eitz HaChaim? So perhaps that's why the Rebbe Rashab is adding that you need the Reshimu, because the Reshimu for sure is not affected by cheshech, by the tzimtzum. Whereas the kav, there is some impact. But I'm not sure about that. I'm just speculating. But it seems that that may be the question and the answer, because he did say it's completely later cheshech miyamav. So you could say two things. You could say that even though the tzimtzum did affect the kav, that doesn't mean the kav lives in the world of darkness. It still lives completely created from the world of light. The tzimtzum affected it, but it's still beyond any type of darkness. You could say that's pshat, or you could say there's a little impact, and the real transformation comes from the level of the Reshimu, the light, the Avir, which is not affected by the tzimtzum. I think the first is more correct, what I'm thinking about it. That even though the kav is affected by the tzimtzum, but it still does not mean it's still an entity created by, it's all light. Nowhere does it say the kav knows of darkness. Even if it's impacted, that's why it's only a kav, but the kav itself is light. It's a ray of light. And it's not, and that's it. It's all about light. Like you said about Chochmah. Okay, just thinking about that out loud. I'll think about it some more. But I'm going to stop here. And then before we go to the next section, we'll stop here. Middle of the page, 1332. Anybody want to ask anything? Okay. So we'll stop here, middle of the page. I want to thank you, Yitzchak, thank you for your kind words about last night's class. Yeah, still percolating in my mind, developing these ideas, but I tried my best to try to apply it in some psychological context.
But I encourage everybody to watch it. Yeah, I posted it, and for people still listening on the recording, you must listen to this because it's Rabbi Jacobson's effort to take this very deep Chassidus and apply it in a very broad, universal, general way that any Tom, Dick, or Harry or Jane could understand and really transform their life. Any tsuras you have in your life, any level, comes down to these core concepts. It's very powerful. Did
you feel that it was understood? Because sometimes I felt I didn't have adequate words, to be honest. I tried my best.
I'm a little biased because I have the inside learning, so it's hard. I guess I want to sit my wife down and have her listen to it. I think it was clear because she was listening as well. She was cooking dinner, but I said, you need to sit down and listen to it. And I think it was clear enough. I really, what I don't think, because you didn't have the time, is to explain how it applies in so many different circumstances. Because it's an infinite number of examples. It could be abuse. It could be something that bad happened in your life. It could be any tsuras. Your own mistakes, the bad places you take yourself on your own, but bad choices, or the bad places you go because other people have made bad choices that have affected you. There's so many places you could go with that. And then to talk about you have to retrace the steps and realize that it doesn't have to be that way. You're not a product of that. Your essence, ultimate essence, is coming from a time and place and a space that precedes whatever that negativity was. It's so broadly applicable that it, like,
obviously I'll definitely talk about it more in later classes, but
you could, that's why I said you could write a book like you did Meaningful Life. You picked a bunch of topics that very critical topics in life, whatever, marriage, birth, death, etc. And you could literally take this system and apply it to each. I haven't thought it through all the way, but I'm pretty sure you could take it through depression, substance abuse, whatever, and take it through those. And then you could apply it in a more particular way, get under the circumstances of that particular malady, sin. It's very broadly applicable. That's why I think you could write a whole book about it.
Okay, yeah, well, I will. I intend to consider definitely developing it further. Okay, good. Thanks. Thank you for that.
Sure. It's wonderful. I really encourage people to listen to it.
Encouragement.